But thank you for your excellent testimony, and I will begin the question and answer part. Thank you so much. As I had said in my opening statement, despite the administration's lip service to the issue of human rights, they've been effectively ignoring human rights in our foreign policy discussion and implementation to the detriment of millions who are suffering under tyranny. As we know, actions speak louder than words, and this administration has thrown human rights to the back burner, especially in places like my native homeland of Cuba and in Iran, where the administration has been desperate to secure deals with these tyrannical regimes. So I'm sorry if I'm not going to pronounce your names correctly, but I have a very difficult name as well, and I don't get upset when people don't know how to say it. Mr. Aria, you testified that human rights have, quote, been overlooked by the international community in light of current negotiations between Iran and the P5+1, end quote. How has the human rights situation in Iran changed during these negotiations under Rouhani?
Well, Madam Chairman, as I said, it's getting worse. I mean, if you look at the Islamic regime, when the Islamic regime is in their nature, when they feel secure, they just become aggressive. When they see that there's no attention being paid to the issue of human rights, for example, they just do whatever they want, and they see no reason why they should stop. They get rid of their opponents. They do all kinds of things that is just true to their nature, but everything has gotten worse. As all the statistics show that everything has gotten worse, from the number of executions, from the number of juveniles being executed, from religious minorities. Everything has been worse under Rouhani. And my take, I think, is that the international community hasn't been paid enough attention to this issue, and they haven't been forcing Rouhani to stand up to his campaign promises and things of that nature. They just focus on the nuclear issue and then push everything aside. So that's unfortunate. I believe that everything has gotten worse, and it's time for international community and U.S. administration especially to pay attention to that issue as well.
Well, I agree, and I see such similarities in my native homeland of Cuba when on December 17th, the president announced we will have diplomatic relations with the Castro regime, and tomorrow another round of negotiations will take place in the State Department, and the lead negotiator for that agreement is Josefina Vidal, who was a spy for Cuba and was actually expelled by the United States because of her espionage activities. Now she's in charge of the negotiations. What signal does that tell the Castro regime? We can do whatever we want and everything is forgiven, and it sends a terrible signal to the human rights activists. That's why it comes as no surprise that since the president's announcement on December 17th, there has been a record number of arrests in Cuba. You would think that at the very least, Raul Castro would tone this down while people are paying attention, but the sad fact is, as you pointed out, people are not paying attention. And so if the United States does not lead the way, the international community will be silent. They will be silent in Cuba, they're silent in Venezuela, and they're silent in Iran. That's why the United States has such a pivotal role to play when it comes to talking about human rights and doing something about human rights. Because if not, it sends a message to Rouhani that he can do whatever he wants, keep executing people, keep jailing people for their religious beliefs. We will look the other way. And that sends a chilling message to so many people living under this yoke of tyranny in Iran who want to be free, who want a different kind of government, but they think, well, obviously no one is paying attention, and the international community, they're so eager to have this nuclear deal that they're willing to look the other way as well. What kind of support do you see for the issue of Iranian human rights internationally in human rights organizations, et cetera?
Well, I believe that on every arena, from the administration to the Congress, this issue should be brought up continuously in United Nations, everywhere, because without that, the Islamic regime won't do anything. They will continue to abuse Iranian people's rights. A very good example, if I may, the way President Reagan dealt with Gorbachev. They wanted to make a deal with Gorbachev. They had good relationship with Gorbachev. They negotiated with him. They did all of that. But at the same time, when President Reagan went to Moscow, he made a point to meet with the dissidents. And that sent a very good message, encouraging message to all the anti-Soviet dissidents all over Soviet Union, former Soviet Union.
That they were not forgotten.
Exactly.
That people cared about them.
Exactly. The attitude of US and European countries and all other countries should be the same way. That whatever negotiations that goes on between, we understand, I'm a member of opposition, I advocate regime change in Iran. But at the same time, I understand that, international relations and, security concerns dictates that sometimes they have to negotiate with the Islamic regime. That's fine. But at the same time, that negotiation, that improvement in relationship should not come at the expense of Iranian people's rights to freedom. That's the most important.
It's not an either or, and,
Exactly.
and yet we give that message to the people with whom we're dealing, whether it's Rouhani, whether it's Castro. They'll say, well, we're just going to talk about diplomatic relations with Cuba. We'll ignore human rights. We're just going to talk about nuclear deal with Rouhani. We'll ignore human rights. And that is a great boost to these regimes to keep harassing, intimidating, and jailing opposition leaders, because they've actually been given a green light to do so by our very own government.
I agree completely.
Mr. Saze Garam?
Yes.
Gara?
Saze Gara.
Thank you. You were one of the founding members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps before being imprisoned for your opposition to the regime. What can you tell us about the inner workings of the IRGC and the Iranian regime, its financing capabilities, and the risk that the IRGC poses to U.S. interests and to our regional security interest?
I was one of the founders of Revolutionary Guard and one of the writers of the Charter of Revolutionary Guard at the first 3 months of victory of revolution. And then I left the Guard and went to National Radio and Television of Iran. But I followed the changes in Revolutionary Guard during the last 36 years. Right now, Revolutionary Guard is, I believe, a kind of unique organization in maybe all around the world, because at the same time, Revolutionary Guard is like a political party, a terrorist organization, a mafia group involved in smuggling of drugs, alcoholic beverages, sex traffic in Iran, a complex, a holding company, owns several companies, huge manufacturing and trading companies of Iran. And its intelligence organization, which directly works under command of son of the Ayatollah, the leader of Iran, is more brutal than Ministry of Intelligence and more powerful. So a part of, at least the most important part of the nuclear project of Iran are controlled by Revolutionary Guard as well. Besides to that, I think that especially this coming year, 2015 and 2016, because of illness of the leader, the political competition in Iran amongst several factions, especially inside Revolutionary Guard, will be increased. And for this simple reason, as a political activist, I'm really, really afraid of more brutality, more suppression of the people during this year and the year after. And the economic crisis, which has been created not only because of the sanctions, more than the sanctions are mismanagement and oil price, which has been decreased about 60%, and several other factors will affect the several aspects of Iranian people on this year. And again, riots, strikes, protests of workers, of teachers, I believe that will be suppressed brutally by Revolutionary Guard this year and the year after. I want to add
In Iran itself.
Yeah.
And what about their, what about the risks that they pose for our interest and regional concerns?
As you know, the Quds Force of Revolutionary Guard, which has about 14,000 members, is the special division of Revolutionary Guard, which is in charge of out-of-Iran operations. I think that because of the internal affairs of Iran, Quds Force of Revolutionary Guard will increase the out-of-Iran operations and adventurism in region. When I say adventurism, because they know from the period of war between Iran and Iraq that in crisis and military situation and in out of Iran crisis, they can have the upper hand in internal politics. For instance, recently the missile platforms in Golan Heights, which were attacked by Israelis and destroyed. As far as I know, there are several projects like that in whole region. Or assassination of some prominent opposition figures outside Iran by new method that they hired some thugs to attack to them just by knives or daggers or something like that. But the example that happened in Jerusalem about 2 or 3 months ago, or other crises. I mean, I expect for the year coming acceleration of out of Iran operations, terrorist operations, and creating some conflicts especially because of the internal competitions in Iran.
To take away attention from their inner problems, have them focus on that?
And they know that in such situations, they will become more powerful in internal politics. If they say that, yes, we are involved in Iraq, this is the war over there, in Yemen, with Israel, especially with Israel, in the border of Israel, or Hezbollah of Lebanon involvement in some battles against Israel, or several others, the other operations that they have done so far, they can have the upper hand in internal politics as well. I want to add to Mr. Arias that as far as I know, Mr. Kerry has agreed with Mr. Zarif to put any human rights issue off the table. That's what, at the first terms of the rounds of negotiations, Zarif has told that if you bring any human rights issue on the table, then Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader, will order us to leave the table. So they have confidence that there will be no pressure.
They don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
it'll be off the table.
You know, Iranians watch the U.S. policies through some windows like Voice of America. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, these days, they don't hear anything even from Voice of America. and the regime sells the idea to the people that, see, we have behind the curtain.
We're fine.
We have the agreement, and nobody can help you. You look at that. There is nothing to say
And the
about
opposition
that.
feels dispirited. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mr. Vance, the regime's treatment of Baha'is is getting worse under Rouhani, not better. Can you describe the treatment and the abuse of Baha'is under Rouhani, and what does the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran mean for human rights in general? And what more can you tell me about the prisoner of conscience that I had adopted, Rosita Basheghi, her health, her current situation, including the likelihood that Iranian authorities will try to imprison her again? Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had been, first, we were guardedly optimistic when President Rouhani was elected that he would actually improve the situation, especially since he had promised, one of his election promises was to put together a draft charter of citizens' rights and have it circulated and finalized. He did actually issue a draft in November of 2013.
Oh, you should read the Cuban Constitution. It's a beauty. they don't follow one word of it, but it's beautiful.
We were very disappointed with the draft because it made all of the rights under it contingent on the Iranian Constitution and on Iranian law. So it didn't actually hold out any promise for any future improvements. And I think the draft got a great deal of pushback and criticism from a number of circles, and so it has never been actually circulated again, as to the best of our knowledge. And that, I think, signaled what we were beginning to see, and that is that one of the trends, we've always had Baha'is who've been harassed, raids on homes, raids on businesses. The amount of physical abuse in those raids has actually increased over the last couple of years, and certainly has not decreased under President Rouhani. Baha'is have, because they're excluded from so many professions in Iran, they've become largely small business people, running their own small businesses. And there's a very large amount of economic harassment, refusing to either provide or renew business licenses, closing shops arbitrarily. In October, for example, on October 25th in Kirman and a couple of other cities nearby, there were 79 shops that were closed simply because the shopkeepers had observed a Baha'i holy day. And so the shops were actually sealed. But perhaps the most disturbing thing that has occurred, at least in my opinion, is the increase in hate propaganda, because it's been shown in many societies that it's a prerequisite, or at least it presages in many societies, a much more serious crackdown on the population that's being targeted. You know, I mentioned that in 2014, there were 18 times the number of anti-Baha'i articles, not just, criticizing Baha'is, but portraying them as being agents of the United States, agents of Russia, agents of Israel, accusing them of all sorts of immorality. It's all designed to create a sense in people's minds that persecution of Baha'is is justified. So based on the very unfortunate history of good portions of the 20th century, I am much more concerned about that than any other single factor. And certainly that would be within the control of, all of this is state-sponsored media, and that's certainly within the control, or should be in the control of President Rouhani. So we are concerned about that. We're concerned that for human rights in general in Iran, because the Baha'is are the largest non-Muslim religious minority in the country, and because they have been traditionally despised to a greater degree than any other group by the Muslim clergy, we know that if things were to improve for the Baha'is, they would improve for everybody, because it's inconceivable that things could get better for the Baha'is in Iran without them also getting better for other groups. So, in a sense, we're that barometer, let's say, of what, how we're being treated is a barometer for the rest of the civil society. And as to Rosita Vassegri, we're delighted that she was released from prison in Mashhad on January 21st. You had noted earlier that she's uncertain as to what her future is because she had 2 5-year sentences, and it was unclear whether they were going to be successive or concurrent. The way things stand at the moment, they were concurrent. They released her. But she was also told that she might have another 2-year sentence, and so we don't know what's going to happen with that. She certainly has some health problems that have to be dealt with, and rather than get into the details of that, I can simply say that 5 years in prison in Mashhad took a definite health toll on her. Thank you.
Which was one of the objectives of the regime. Thank you very much. Excellent, excellent answers. We appreciate it. Mr. Cicilline.